Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, Finding Yourself Again, where we focus on hope, healing, and recovery from toxic narcissistic abuse. The ultimate goal is to establish self-love, healthy relationships, and ultimately find yourself. My name is Dontre. I'm a survivor of toxic abuse from a narcissist/borderline. If you find that these videos are helpful to you, I ask that you subscribe, like, share the content, and watch any of my other videos that might be helpful to you or others. I ain't gonna hold you up. So with that being said, let's get to today's video. So today's video is gonna be about what is a trauma bond. And don't mind my shirt, y'all. I got a little hole in it. I know y'all are probably gonna keep staring at it now that I mentioned it, but I'm kind of a plain dude. I like my nice stuff, but so, on a daily casual, I'm just more like a casual type of dude. I don't gotta like flex every day and all that. So the topic of today is gonna be, what is a trauma bond? I'm gonna give you guys a real definition of what it is first. And before I do that, I'm gonna tell you the reason why I wanted to make this video. Hey guys, I'm back. I got a little caught up earlier. Something came up. I had to prioritize, kind of adjust my schedule a little bit. But I gotta get this in, baby. We're locked in over here. Me and you, everybody that watches this channel, we're locked in with this stuff. So I gotta make sure that I'm dropping these videos daily. And so yeah, I wanted to mention the reason why I wanted to create this video, and it's because I understand how it is to be in these types of relationships. I understand how it is to go through it, get through it, the aftermath, and I know what a trauma bond actually is and how it forms and stuff like that, right? And it's important to know that type of stuff. So, I know that there's gonna be some people out there that don't necessarily know what a trauma bond is and all the little aspects that go along with it. So that's why I made this video, so that there's no confusion moving forward with the other topics that I'm gonna address, because you're gonna hear me say things like trauma bond, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is gonna be the video that you want to watch, right? So I already explained what a trauma bond is, basically a basic definition of it. Now I'm going to get into some key points and interesting info. The cycle of abuse is key. Trauma bonds don't come from relationships that are only negative all the time. There has to be some good moments. You know what I'm saying? Some hope, right? And the intermittent kindness and positive moments create confusion and hope in the victim. Like I was just saying, the hope part. These end up being little breadcrumbs. This is called breadcrumbing. Where the victim will cling on to these moments and believe that the abuser's good side is the true self. In my opinion, this one is so sad and hurtful, man, and it's harmful. And I've been here before, and it's where you have like a sense of false hope, a false reality, and it's just more hurtful when your partner gets worse and continues to disregard you. You know what I'm saying? It just gets a whole lot. It gets a whole lot worse. Intermittent reinforcement. You're going to hear me talk about this a lot, especially regarding this topic of narcissists and toxic abuse. This is an inconsistent treatment and plays a powerful part in your brain neurologically. It creates a sense of anticipation and craving the good times again. Those breadcrumbing moments, right? It's very similar to how addiction actually works, and like gambling and drugs. This is how codependency becomes strengthened. The brain releases dopamine in the positive times, creating a reward pathway linked directly to the abuser, the one that's abusing you. And the unpredictability of the abuser's behavior creates anticipation and keeps the victim like hyper vigilant all the time and just emotionally invested in the relationship, hoping for the next high, just like a drug. I found it interesting because right after my breakup, I found myself looking at books in Barnes and Nobles, trying to find answers. And it's funny because at first I was trying to like find books to understand my partner so I can try to keep my relationship, and it turned out that in reality I needed to let the relationship go, like most of you know by now. And I think it's interesting because I found myself right next to the addiction books, and I'm looking around like, yo, why am I like right next to the addiction books? And it's because what I was going through was codependency and withdrawals after the relationship, just like a drug. Physical withdrawals, mental withdrawals, emotional. Like, I was having all the withdrawals. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'm laying in bed, I'm feeling weak, just terrible. Terrible. Um, I'm in there thinking like I don't have a drug problem, you know what I mean? But little did I know I had a addiction problem to a person, an unhealthy attachment, and it can develop into actually symptoms of like a drug addiction, very similar to drug addiction. um you would think that after leaving an abuser you would be happy. However, I was physically sick, like physically sick. I couldn't eat or sleep. I was a mess emotionally. I was vulnerable in every way. It was pretty bad actually. The next one I want to talk about is called power imbalance. And trauma bonds form in relationships usually with a significant power imbalance, when the abuser holds more control, whether emotionally, financially, socially. This imbalance makes the victim feel dependent on the abuser for their needs, including validation, safety, even if safety is inconsistently provided, or maybe for like financial reasons and stuff like that. So you want to watch out for like any type of like imbalance in the relationship. My thoughts are, especially in these days, I think you should bring equality to the relationship. You know what I mean? Obviously, things won't be perfect, like 50-50 all the time, but I would advise you to try to keep a balance and make sure that there is at least reciprocation and equality in the relationship. So that's what I would say about that one. The next key thing is going to be erosion of self-worth. This is the constant abuse and devaluation, and what it does is it chips away at the victim's self-esteem and self-worth. They may start to believe the abuser's negative comments or assessments of them, and they don't feel they deserve better or that no one else would want them. I remember my relationship left me a shell of myself. I constantly questioned my worth and value to others, especially in the dating market, right? And at times, for a long time, I wondered if I would ever find anyone as good as my last partner. And obviously, I'm talking about looks, And since then, I've met plenty good looking people. I just realized that they weren't for me long term and they're more like for the moment. Which that's okay for me. I'm very cautious who I allow emotionally close to me now, because it takes work and time to build up your self-worth again after these experiences, but it is possible if you keep living. So if you stay alive and keep living, you can look forward to things changing for the better, as long as you put that work in. Next one is going to be normalization of abuse. Over time, the cyclical nature of abuse can lead the victim to normalize the unhealthy behavior. What might seem shocking to others might seem normal to a victim of abuse, making it harder for the victim to realize that they're being abused. This is when you hear people excusing obvious toxic behaviors. Plain and simple. It's plain and simple. If you find yourself having to excuse, or if you find yourself excusing toxic behaviors, then more than likely you're experiencing a normalization of abuse. The next one is going to be fear of the unknown, fear of the abuser. Victims often develop a deep fear of leaving, possibly due to the abuser's reaction, like retaliation, stalking, guilt tripping. They can also be a fear of being alone, which is probably most common. Fear of change and the unknown, very common, outside the relationship, or not being able to survive without the abuser in a financial or social situation. My thoughts. For me, like most others, I was afraid to be alone and face the world by myself. I didn't want change, not in this way, but it was necessary. It was hard, but it was necessary. I didn't want to leave the love of my life. I loved the toxic person at a point in time, just like most of you guys do, I'm sure. And you don't really want to leave those people. You know what I mean? You it's almost like you just wish they could be better and just adapt, but if it's one thing I learned about relationships, you're better off finding somebody that you enjoy, like physically, like the looks wise, and as well as somebody that you can that is willing to compromise with you, and somebody that just has good qualities about themselves. They don't got to be perfect, but somebody that has morals and values and qualities about themselves, of a healthy person. Okay, so let me see. Let's go to the next one. All right, so the next thing is going to be cognitive dissonance. To cope with the conflicting reality of the abuse and occasional positive moments, the victim may experience cognitive dissonance, which is where they rationalize the abuser's behavior by minimizing it, blaming themselves, others, to make sense of the situation and preserve the hope that good times will return. If you notice, a lot of this keeps... cognitive dissonance is that false sense of hope, right? Thinking like, oh, it's like that false reality, like, oh no, this person really is a good person because of, that one time 3 weeks ago where they were nice to me. You know what I mean? Like, it don't work like that, but you're in cognitive dissonance because you're not acknowledging all of the toxic behaviors that are going on. Next one is going to be difficulty seeing reality. Due to the intense emotional investment and the neurological effects of the trauma bond, it can distort the victim's perception of reality. Victim struggles to see the abuser objectively, even when presented with clear evidence of abuse. That was basically what I was saying. So next, I'm going to go over some things to keep in mind. All right. Breaking the trauma bond is possible. Stay tuned for my next video where I provide a 5-step process for breaking a trauma bond. This will require recognizing the cycle, seeking outside support from a mental health professional, support groups, and related content. This will also include establishing firm, permanent boundaries like no contact and focusing on rebuilding self-esteem and independence. Healing involves rewiring the brain. The same neurological way that the bond formed through pathways, it's the same way that healing will be required through healthy pathways. This takes time, patience, consistent effort, and self-care, and processing the trauma. All right, y'all, so this is the last one, and it's interesting information that I just wanted to include in the video about the trauma bond. And the concept of trauma bonding has been studied in various contexts beyond romantic relationships, including hostage situations, cults, and even some family dynamics, highlighting the universality of these psychological mechanisms under conditions of power imbalance and intermittent reinforcement. So I just wanted to include that these types of trauma bonds basically occur under like very strong repetitive behavior that is doing damage to your mind. It's wiring your brain in an unhealthy way. A cult, hostage situation, like those are serious situations, you know what I mean? Family dynamics, because of how some people grow up, but it's unhealthy, and you want to stay away from it generally. You want to live a healthy life and not be living with this added stress and problems, right? So anyways, guys, I hope that these videos provide you with useful information so you can have better understanding of what a trauma bond is. Thanks so much, guys. If you made it to the end of this video, I'm going to ask that you please consider helping me out by subscribing to my channel, liking the video, watching other of my content, and sharing my videos to anybody that may be in need or it may be helpful for. Other than that, I know that these topics are difficult, and I want you to know that you're not alone in this. There's plenty of narcissistic and toxic abuse survivors out there like myself, and I'm sending my love through here and compassion and empathy towards you, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye, guys.